All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Virtual Parent Academy. My name is Tori Gurnice, and I'm the coordinator of Family and Community Engagement. We are super excited to have you with us tonight as we continue working together to support our students and families here in Clay County. Tonight's session is going to focus on FAFSA fundamentals, helping families better understand the free application for federal student aid process and how to access valuable financial support for college. We are thrilled to welcome our guest speaker and presenter, Steve Kinney, Assistant Director of Financial Aid and Veteran Affairs at St. John's River State College. Steve brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to help guide families through the FAFSA process. Before we get started, just a few quick reminders. This session is being recorded and it will be available on our district webpage and on our YouTube channel for you to revisit or share with others. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A session. We're going to go ahead and turn that on now, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. If we're not able to answer your question tonight, please don't worry. Somebody from our team is going to follow up with you afterwards to make sure you get all the support that you need. Once again, thank you for being here and for partnering with us to support your student success. At this time, please join me in welcoming Steve Kinney, who will guide us through tonight's session on FAFSA fundamentals.
There we go. All right, let me share my screen real quick and we'll start the show. What you need to know about financial aid. There's a couple of slides that we won't go through because I know everyone's time is valuable. But if you have questions, type it in the chat and I'll allow some time at the end if you guys have any questions to try to answer your questions. What we're going to discuss today is basically cost of attendance, student aid, financial aid, the different categories of financial aid, the FAFSA itself, special and unusual circumstances, and what your student will need if they're starting in August of 2026. Basically, financial aid is funds that students and families receive to help pay for their college education. That financial aid can be from the government-based student loans or the Pell Grant, which is the money that you don't have to pay back, or private loans. You can go to your bank and now get educational loans, or through companies like Citizens or Nelnet. Your cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is what a college will use to determine how much they project your students' education to cost, either broken down by semester or year to year, depending on the college. Some colleges don't have a dorm, so you won't have housing as a calculation. You won't consider housing as part of your student's cost of attendance, but for federal purposes, they still have to come up with a number. So just kind of keep in mind when you're looking at all your colleges your student wants to attend, some things that might factor into you. As an example, transportation. I have a lot of my students who live literally in walking distance of the college, so that won't factor into how much it costs for the school. You can go to the next slide. Your student aid index, this is a new number. So if you had students who went to college or you yourself attended college in 2024 and before, this used to be called the EFC. The government's now changed it to student aid index. And basically it's a calculation determined by the government to determine how much of a need your student has as far as do they qualify for Pell Grant. A small bit of that is your student contribution. Does your student work? Do they file taxes? Majority of that's going to be the parent's income for students who are dependent. So a dependent student is anyone under the age of 24, not married, doesn't have kids, and wasn't in the military. Your student could be Mark Zuckerberg, a billionaire. If they're 22, they still will need your tax information to do the FAFSA. All right, you can go to the next slide. So this is how they break it down. Your cost of attendance minus that student aid index, which comes from the FAFSA, equals their financial need at that particular school. Depending on the school determines that financial need. So if your student's going to University of Miami, that financial need may be a lot more because that's a private college. You can go to the next one. Two different types of categories of financial aid: need-based aid, non-need-based aid. Need-based aid is going to be your Pell Grant. Hey, the government's determined based off your tax information that there is a need for you for them to help pay for your school. So as an example, you can be married with 2 kids, but if all your household income is $20,000, you're going to qualify for needs-based aid compared to that same scenario. And as a household, you guys make $500,000. You don't have a need because based off the government's determination, you can afford aid yourself. So that's where you come into the non-need based aid, such as student loans. You can go to the next one. And this is where we have your loans, scholarships, grants, work study, employment. Majority of colleges, if they accept FAFSA, they do student loans and accept the Pell Grant. Your FAFSA looks at you for Pell Grants only. At the end of the FAFSA, it tells you whether you qualify for Pell Grant or not. If you don't qualify for the Pell Grant, it lets you know, hey, student loans, this is what you're eligible for. But you are not doing a loan application with the FAFSA. It's only looking at you for the Pell Grant. That's a lot of thing that trips up a lot of parents is you guys think that you're also applying for a loan. Most colleges have a totally separate loan application for that. Your students can also apply for scholarship. I highly recommend that even if they're not sure where they want to go, to just start applying for scholarships. There's a free website. Let me see if I can find the chat. I'll put it in the chat. It's going to be called fastweb.com. And with that, your students can go in there, they'll create a profile, and based off that profile, it's going to come back and tell them what scholarships they are eligible for. I also suggest to students when they are applying for scholarships that they create a totally separate email address so that their regular email doesn't get clogged up with spam. So my email address would be stevekinney@gmail.com. That way, when I'm applying for scholarships, that's the only thing that goes there. If your student messes up, or if you yourself are going back to college and you mess up, and the next thing you do is you get a call from me saying, hey, welcome to, you want to go to Steve's trucking school? Just say, remove me off your list. They'll remove you off your list, off their call list. You can go to the next one. Just go through all the little things. Work study employment, exactly what it sounds like. Work study. Most colleges have a student worker or have student worker jobs available. With student worker jobs, it's like a regular job. At our college, you apply, you interview. If you are selected for the position, at St. John River State College, we'll work with your student schedule to try to give you hours. Most of the time, it's about 20 to 25 hours a week. But unlike working at Publix, where Publix will say, hey, we'll work with you on your school schedule. And the next thing you know, you've got a shift in the middle of the day when you have class at 10 a.m. St. John River State College, we actually will work around your class schedule. Your sources of financial aid are going to be the federal government, which is what the FAFSA is going to look at, states, the college itself and universities, private sources, and employers. So the state of Florida may have scholarships available. You can just kind of Google state of Florida scholarships. Colleges and universities, majority of them will have a scholarship department or a foundations department. We do at St. John's River State College. It opened up October 1st, and I think it ends April 1st. My recommendation to that is have your students apply for their scholarships to schools that they want to attend if they've been accepted, just to see what they qualify for. My daughter received a scholarship for $8,000 just for being an out-of-state student. Private sources, that's where you're going to look at Nelnet, your bank. Employers offer tuition assistance. Other scholarships that you may be eligible for is look at like the big name companies, Coca-Cola, McDonald's. Those guys have scholarship money just waiting to get to be given away. So look at their websites and see if there's a scholarship that you or your student may be eligible for. You can click the button for the next slide. The federal government, it's the largest source of financial aid, based primarily on financial aid, like we discussed. Here's the kicker, parents. You have to apply for FAFSA every school year. So the thing to remember with FAFSA is the FAFSA school year and the calendar year are two different things. So the FAFSA year runs basically from August to June 30th. July 1st is the start of a new financial aid year for the government. So that means if your student goes fall term, which is August to December, Spring term, January to May, and then summer, May to roughly August 1st, as an example. That's considered one academic year or one financial aid year. So depending on what school your child goes to, you want to ask what time frames do they have? Because some schools start a little bit early, start a little bit later. Um, with the FAFSA, even though it says you may qualify for student loans or the Pell Grant, that's a preliminary offer, we shall call it, because you still need to meet certain eligibility requirements. If your student checks the wrong box on the FAFSA and says, "Oh, my parents will not help me with the FAFSA," FAFSA will automatically tell them that they're qualified for the full amount of Pell. When that school receives the FAFSA information, there's documentation that the student would need to provide to support. Hey, my parents don't help me out with anything. I don't talk to them. There's things that we can do. So that's where those eligibility requirements must be met, because the FAFSA doesn't know that your student clicked the wrong button. So most schools, if they click a button and are fully Pell eligible, you may be asked to require or submit documentation to your school to satisfy that you are eligible for the full amount of Pell. You can go to the next slide. Here are certain federal student aid programs. St. John's, we participate in the Pell Grant, the Federal Work Study, student loans. Plus loans are supposed to be going away. That's why there's an asterisk. But we do not participate in the Teach Grant or FSEOG. Federal Work Study is still, if you're a student worker, you may also be eligible for what's called a Federal Work Study program, which is just supplemental income to help pay your tuition as well, or to go towards your tuition. You can go to the next slide. The eligibility, this is for students starting in August and forward. If your student aid index exceeds twice the maximum amount of the Pell Grant amount, or other monies coming in cover your entire cost of attendance, you are not eligible for the Pell Grant. So what that means for your student is if their student aid index is 2,000, and Pell Grant and other scholarships, they received a total of, in scholarships, they received a total of $2,000 as well. Even if they're eligible for that Pell Grant, no matter what that dollar amount is, because that scholarship covers their what we'll call the unmet need, the SAI, they won't be eligible for that Pell Grant. And that's new. So if you have a student who went to school this year, qualified for the full amount of Pell, got scholarships, and then the coming year in August, what'll end up happening is that they receive enough money to cover their cost of attendance, they're not going to be eligible for Pell. And that's just one you'll have to talk to your school about to see if you meet those qualifications or not. Hit the next slide. Here are the plus loan changes. At St. John River State College, you can apply for the plus loan. I highly recommend not to do it, just because for Parent Plus loans, that is based off the parent's credit. And our tuition is economical enough that your student can just apply for the student loans if they don't qualify for Pell. And that will be almost enough to cover their tuition and books for their first year with us. You can go to the next slide. Depending on where your student attends, there will be requirements that need to be made. For St. John River State College, they have to meet residency requirements to receive the in-state rate. Their aid they receive may also be provided based off of both merit and need. Merit is you do an essay or scholarship, and need is, hey, what was your FAFSA SAI index? Was there an unmet need there? All of that information is from the need-based grants. Our need-based aid is gathered from the FAFSA itself. At St. John River State College, we only do a FAFSA, but I know, for example, if your student goes to University of Miami, they'll have you do a FAFSA, and they have their own internal application for funding as well. Deadlines will vary state to state. So depending on where your child wants to go, they need to pay attention to the deadline. So as an example, if the deadline is October 31st to submit financial aid applications, scholarships, anything of that nature, they mean October 31st. So if your student's like, oh, I forgot to hit submit button, let me do it November 1st, more than likely that application link is dead. So when your students see deadlines, tell them it's important not to wait till the to the day of. If they can, get it in a week before, 2 days before, so they're assured that they get it. And if there's any problems, hopefully that school will reach out if possible, or the student can follow up with the school and say, hey, I submitted my application. I just want to make sure you received it. But once that deadline is gone, it's gone. You can go to the next slide. So this is kind of where I talked about before applying to University of Miami. I know UNF has their own internal scholarships that you apply for with deadlines as well. Once again, deadlines, application requirements vary by institution. I know the UNF scholarship manager, director, and they are dead fast. If their deadline says November 1st, that's only applications they're looking at. Anything turned in after the 1st, after, for example, noon, they're not looking at all. So when your students are submitting these scholarships, make sure they follow up with the colleges to make sure that they received it. And then ask the follow-up question, when will you guys make a determination as far as whether or not I will receive the scholarship, and will I receive an email or phone call? You can go to the next slide. Private sources, like I talked about before, Coke, McDonald's. I know Clay Electric offers a scholarship. Same thing there. Deadlines is the key thing for this stuff. Submitted after the deadline, more than likely won't get looked at. But definitely if they're going to college, tell them to start looking at the private places early, because what happens is students wait till the very, very end. I've graduated. I'm going to go to school in August. Let me try to apply for these scholarships. A lot of the scholarships might have opened up October. Once a lot of companies reach that scholarship number that they're looking for as far as dollars awarded, they're not looking at anything else. That's why deadlines are important. You can go to the next slide. Your employers may have scholarships. This is what I tell my students who say, hey, my job has tuition assistance, or my job's offering a scholarship. Like I know Walmart has a tuition assistance program. If they're interested in looking to their job to help pay for their education, have your student ask the question, if I apply for this scholarship or tuition assistance and receive it, does that require me to stay with the organization for a certain period of time? Some students may put in an extra 2 years. Some students may not. It just all depends. But at least ask that question so they know up front what they're agreeing to. You can hit the next slide. So the student aid estimator, this is you doing the FAFSA. It was working. This is a government website. So basically, what's supposed to happen is if you went to that website and plugged in your information, it'll give you a rough estimate of what your SAI is. Now, with that said, that SAI isn't an end-all be-all number. Like as a parent, I used it for my daughter just to see what would happen. It spits out a number, but as a parent, you have no idea what 10,000 means. All that SAI is a sliding, is a scale for the Department of Education to determine your Pell eligibility. At a certain dollar amount or number, you're either eligible for Pell or you're not. So that's what it's used for there. But on that website, it won't really tell you Pell eligibility or not. At least it wasn't when I looked at it a couple of weeks ago. You can hit the next slide. The FAFSA itself, free application for federal student aid. There are websites out there. If your student just Googles FAFSA and they put FASFA, they'll get directed to a paid for FAFSA application. I had a student do it a couple of years ago. They paid $80 for this website to process their FAFSA. We received the information, but that student paid $80 to get that information processed when it's actually a free application. So just make sure if your student comes to you and says, hey, mom, dad, they need $20, $40, whatever dollar amount, it could be 50 cents to process my application. They're on the wrong website. So make sure they go to the right website. You can go to the next slide. The FAFSA is supposed to open up every October 1st. I will tell you based off experience, it usually opens up October 1st, but that first week is very buggy. So you guys may log in on October 1st and it might let you get through half of it before the website crashes. Don't freak out. It's not your internet. It's just a FAFSA website. Everyone's logging in and it's crashing. So what I recommend students do is when they go start the FAFSA, click save. There's a save button at the top. Just click save every time they go to the next page. It's supposed to automatically do it, but I like to hit the save button. That way I know it's done it. Once again, colleges can set FAFSA priority deadlines. For us, our deadline says, hey, as long as you get the FAFSA done by June 30th, we can assure that we can process your financial aid for the upcoming fall semester in August. But every college is different with their deadlines. The earlier you get the FAFSA in, the earlier the college can process that FAFSA. I can tell you for St. John's, we probably will not get to see your FAFSA in the system until sometime mid-May, mid to late May. Other colleges, they may see it sooner than that. You can hit the button. This has two ways for you guys to do the FAFSA, online and PDF. Everyone here is going to do it online. If you do it PDF, you have to fill it all out and then mail it to the government and wait for them to process it. I had one student do that, and it took 3 months for them to get the FAFSA loaded into the system. Online, St. John's, we see it in 1 week, your FAFSA results. You can go to the next slide. Here are the benefits that we talked about doing the FAFSA. The big one here is that it's skip logic. So that just basically means if you answer certain questions a certain way, it'll automatically fast track you to the very end of the FAFSA. One of those questions, as an example, is, did you receive any governmental assistance? And it'll break down the government assistance. SNAP, housing assistance. You select one of those answers, it's automatically going to say, hey, you automatically qualify for full Pell, and just say, hey, all you have to do now is sign the FAFSA. I will say this will trip certain parents up. If you are newly divorced and you did your taxes the previous year, married, filing jointly, now this past year you did separate, FAFSA doesn't like that, and you will get an error message. Basically, it just means, hey, they need your ex-spouse's information to do the FAFSA, and they'll kind of walk you through what needs to be done there. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you fall into that category, it might not work for you the way it's supposed to. You can go to the next slide. This FAFSA here, this is the FAFSA website. It used to be called FAFSA.ed.gov. Then they changed it to studentaid.gov. Your student will create a username and password. They will use their own email address, and if they have a cell phone, their own phone number. The parent, either mom or dad, whichever one is the more tech savvy, I shall say, they'll create their own username and password with their own phone number and email address. The key to remember here for everyone involved with creating a username and password is that you make it something you remember, write it down, take a picture. Because if you forget it, the forgot password option is a pain in the neck to try to get it all back. One of the things that FAFSA does to kind of help with that is they'll have you create 4 challenge questions. Make sure the challenge questions you remember. You don't know how many times I'll have a parent say, what was my first car? I don't remember. One of the challenge questions. You guys pick the answer. So make sure it's something that you're going to remember a year from now. You can go to the next slide. Here's a screenshot of it. If your student is starting in August, they're going to do the 26-27 FAFSA. If they're trying to start in January or May, they're going to do where it says the 25-26 FAFSA form. You can go to the next slide. As a student, they're going to click on the student portion. As a parent, when you log into your profile, it'll have that enter code. Just click there and you'll enter in your code. That is, it's basically an invite code. You can go to the next slide. That's another screen. You just go to the next slide. There we go. What this is saying here, direct data exchange. FAFSA now works directly with the IRS. So when you accept the terms and agreement for this data exchange, it will automatically load your tax information in there. In previous years, you had to key in that information yourself. Now it automatically loads in it. It cuts your FAFSA time from 20 minutes down to like 5 or 10. But once again, like I said, if you're one of those Parents who recently was divorced or filed married filing jointly 1 year, separated the next, it might not link for you as well. It'll give you a message that says, hey, we need your spouse's information. You can hit the slide button. Here's the PDF FAFSA that I highly suggest that no one uses because it takes all day to do. But you can if you want. Just know everyone's been warned how long it takes. You can hit the button. Student information. We're all parents and we want our kids to do adult things that are reasonable and acceptable. Try to let them fly. FAFSA is one of those things that they can get pushed out the nest for. Just make sure that your student knows their full name, their social, their birthday. I've had students before who've legitimately asked me, hey, do you know how to spell my middle name? Buddy, I don't know who you are. I'm just helping you do the FAFSA. Or they'll ask me, is my social correct? I'm not a hacker. I don't know what your social is. So make sure your students know their social and birthday. If anything with numbers is wrong concerning their social or their birthday, FAFSA is not going to give them an error message saying it's wrong. It'll just say, hey, everything's good on our end. We have to match your social in the system. And then they'll get an error message maybe a week or two later saying, hey, we couldn't verify you with the Social Security office. You got to check your stuff. Then they have to call FAFSA to try to figure out what they did wrong. As a school, we can't see that information, what's wrong. So just make sure your student knows exactly what their information is. Personal and unusual circumstances. This is where, as an example, you or your student may have experienced, the most common one is homelessness during the school year. That would be an unusual circumstances. If you check that box, a little error message comes up on FAFSA saying, hey, you need to talk to your financial aid officer at your college. Give it a week and then come into school and you'll meet with a financial aid officer to discuss your situation to see if it is valid enough, because some people just hit the wrong button, that we need to move further with documentation. But that's what you would do for unusual circumstances. Another usual circumstances is your student our students graduated high school. This hopefully won't be anybody in here. And both parents passed away before they started college. That's an unusual circumstance where we'll need paperwork from the student. So those kind of things do happen. Just know that the FAFSA and Department of Education allow schools leeway to make a judgment call as far as whether or not, based upon our approval or denial, you either approve for financial aid or denied, we need more paperwork. You can go to the next slide. Student dependency. This is kind of where I spoke about earlier, under 24, married, military, all of that stuff. That determines a student's dependent status. That is separate from a student's dependent status for residency. Two different things. Just know that your student may be considered independent for residency purposes to get the in-state tuition rate, but for financial aid purposes, they're not. You can go to the next slide. Here we go with the unusual circumstances. There's a question on the FAFSA that says, and your student has to read, it's automatically selected to no, but it basically says, will either your parents provide FAFSA information, yes or no? If your student says, I'm sorry, it's worded weird. So it's defaulted to where no means, yeah, your parents will provide information. Yes means they will not provide information. If your student selects yes, that you will not provide information as a parent, that FAFSA will automatically say, hey, you're an independent student, you qualify fully for Pell. And then when they follow up with us in a week, we all need documentation. Well, why aren't your parents providing your information? Just because a parent doesn't want to give their tax information is not reason enough for parents not to do the FAFSA. From a parent standpoint, the FAFSA only looks at your tax information to determine, is there a need for your student to receive the Pell Grant? That's it. Parents, you aren't audited by the government. If you put your information into the FAFSA, they really only care about does your student qualify for Pell Grant or not? And that's how that works. You can hit the next slide. Once again, student information, high school demographic, citizenship status. If your student is, I had this one too. I had a student who came over from South Africa. So their citizenship status, they received a green card. They need to have that green card number to put into the FAFSA to determine their eligibility status. High school information. To receive financial aid from the government FAFSA, they need to have an approved high school diploma, not a certificate of completion. You can go to the next button. This again is tax return information. They talk about the student assets here. A lot of our students, my daughter in particular, she didn't work during school. I let her enjoy her whole high school life. So for her, she didn't have anything. So when they ask that question about how much you have in checking, savings, all that, I tell students and parents at the end of the month after you pay your bills, that's the number they're really looking for. So at the end of the month, if you don't have any money in there and it's zero, you can put zero. That's kind of, I don't know how much money you have in the bank is how I approach that question. You can hit the next button. Here, what will happen is when a student gets to a certain part, they're going to ask for their parents' information, demographics, name, social, birthday, and email address. When they put in your email address as a parent, it'll say send invite, and you'll receive an email from FAFSA saying, Steve has invited you to complete your FAFSA. Please click this link. You can either click the link or go directly to the student aid website to complete your parent portion. And it'll say on there, are you accepting an invitation? Just click that button and it'll walk you through it. You can hit the next slide. Hit the next slide. Hit the next slide. Parent information, kind of like what we talked about. You'll put in all your information, demographics. You'll either say yes to consenting to transfer all your information over into the FAFSA or no. I highly recommend that you say yes, because that's less work that you have to do as a parent, and it automatically loads everything in there for you. That way it doesn't allow for any keystroke errors. I've had students before or whose parents, when we used to do it manually, they made $50,000 on their job, but they accidentally hit zero and put that they made $500,000. You weren't eligible for any type of Pell Grant, and they had 8 or 9 kids. That's kind of how that works. Go to the next slide. Family size and number in college. This is very important. If you as a parent are going to college and your child's also going to college, parent, when you're completing the FAFSA, you include your child because your child is dependent of you. But on the flip side, if your student's going to college and you're going to college and your student's completing the FAFSA, they can't include you as the person in college because you're not you're not their dependent. So just make sure that if you both are going to college, parents can claim their kids, but the kids can't claim their parents on the taxes. That's how that works. If they have siblings going, they can say, oh yeah, there's 2 people going to college, but that's how that one works. You can get the next button. See if I can show you here. This here will tell you if you qualify for, that your FAFSA has been submitted. If it works, and this is a FAFSA thing, sometimes it'll do a calculation for you and sometimes it won't about whether or not you qualify for Pell. Go to the next line. Yeah. What happens when you hit that signature button, that next slide on the FAFSA, if you scroll down, it'll tell you whether or not you qualify for Pell. I can tell you from a loan standpoint, if all your students are just graduating high school this year, or they might have graduated last year, they're a dependent student, they're going to qualify for the maximum amount of student loans as for a dependent student, which is $5,500 for the school year, is what that would do. If you are married, your spouse information may be required as well. That one's an asterisk, just really depends on when you were married. Sometimes FAFSA asks for spouse information and sometimes it doesn't. I have no idea how FAFSA determines when it asks that question because I've seen it both ways. You can hit the button for the next slide. Here's your family size. Dependent students, the student themselves, parents, and spouse. Now, what they're talking about there for parent and spouse is if mom and dad are separated and they both remarried, FAFSA wants to know which parent do you basically stay with the most? And if it's half, then the parents get to pick which parent wants to do the FAFSA. But that's what they're asking for there is if you guys are split up, who do you majority stay with? Um, Independent students is a little bit easier, just student. And if you're married, your spouse. If you're not married and you have kids, students and your kids, even if your spouse has custody of those kids, you still consider your kids into that equation. Other people, if they live with you as a student or a parent, what they're looking for there is, are you providing financial support? So if your mother stays with you or your parents stay with you, and if they didn't stay with you, they lived in a van down by the river, then that's who you include in your household, right? Um, what they don't consider someone staying in your household is, oh, your child's friend is couch surfing for a month or two. They're not considering that person. They want someone that you actually fully support more than 6 months out the year is what I usually give as a rough number. You can go to the next slide. Processing FAFSA results. Basically what happens here is the student submits the FAFSA, it goes to the financial processing center, and then its college will receive it in the form of what's called an ISER, or institutional student information record. That just tells us all the FAFSA information you keyed into the system will load for that school, and then we can see exactly what you did. So as an example, if you feel that you should have qualified for Pell, you can come in and say, I think I qualify for Pell. We can look at the FAFSA to see if in household you said there's only one person because you didn't count yourself. You didn't count your parents, you just counted yourself. But really, there's 6 of y'all in the house. There's changes you can make to that. You can go to the next slide. Here's the FAFSA summary. It tells you that when you completed it, that data release number is just, once again, a static number for FAFSA. Here's the key when you see that FAFSA submission summary. The date you finish it and complete it, FAFSA will give you an email that says you've successfully completed your FAFSA. Your school will now be able to see your information. For St. John's River State College and majority of colleges, that's not the case, especially for 26, 27. It may take a week. So once your student submits that FAFSA, have them reach out to that school that they've listed as where they want to attend and see, hey, do you see my FAFSA? A lot of schools won't be able to view that FAFSA until you apply to that school for admission. I know for us, once you applying, we'll see your FAFSA. But if you don't apply, we won't load your FAFSA into the system. You can click the next button. Making corrections. If you have to make a correction on your FAFSA, you usually have to wait about 3 to 5 days after your FAFSA has been submitted before FAFSA lets you go back in there and update the information, whether it be something simple as, oh, I misspelled my name, or I put the wrong birthday. You got to wait about that week for you to make that change. You can hit the button. Special circumstances. It's like we talked about with the dependency overrides. I don't have a relationship with my parents. I should be considered a independent student. What documentation does the school need from me? Every school has a dependency override process. What's required varies by the school. Sometimes you have conditions that you won't see on the FAFSA. Like I mentioned before, both parents passed away, or my grandparents received custody of me when I turned 17. There's just some things that don't fall into an answer on the FAFSA. And when that happens, your student will have to just come into the school and talk to that financial aid officer to see what options they may have available for them. With that said, when you submit those kind of circumstances, dependency override or other unusual circumstances, it is based on that school's judgment on the documentation that you have submitted and the guidelines the Department of Education gives the school, whether or not we can appeal or deny that situation. If it's denied, like it says here, it's a final denial. I've denied stuff. I denied one last week. The student wanted to know if they could appeal it. There's no appeal. I denied, and that's that. So kind of where it's at from a student parent standpoint, schools are really limited in their power on what they can do based off of what you submit. It's not one of those things like, oh, you didn't submit this page. If you resubmit it, it's automatically approved. It doesn't work that way. Once you submit it for that calendar year, for that school year, it's denied, and that's that. You can go to the next slide. here's all your special circumstances. Like one of these is medical and dental. Um, if you have excessive medical or dental expenses, that can be factored as an unusual circumstances. Hey, I made $80,000, so I know from a dollar standpoint, I might not qualify for Pell as the parent, but I had $40,000 worth of dental work. That may be enough of a drop in your actual income that you may qualify for Pell. Those kind of things. Loss of employment by the parent or student, depending on the situation. If it's a loss of employment, what's key there is that it's a true loss. You were fired from your job or you were laid off from your job. If you decided to resign from your job because you want to be a nurse, whether you're a parent or student, that's not a special circumstances because you voluntarily gave up that job to be a nurse. And at our school, there's nursing prerequisites involved. So if you're just doing nursing prerequisites, which just means you're doing a number of classes before you have applied to the nursing program itself, those number of classes prerequisites aren't considered you being in the nursing program. Once you're accepted into a nursing program, then those circumstances may change. When you're doing the FAFSA, divorce is a special circumstance. Here's the key with the FAFSA. The day you complete your FAFSA, whatever your marital status is, it is set in stone for that school year. So if you do the FAFSA today, November 4th, and your divorce is finalized November 5th, and now you have that loss of income because you're now divorced officially, you can't go back and fix the FAFSA. You can go to the next slide. And that's it. I'm going to go to chat and see if anybody has any questions. No, it doesn't look like anybody had any questions. If anybody has any questions, they can put it in the chat now. If not, I will let Victoria take over.
I don't think we have any questions, but thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your expertise with us tonight. And thank you, all of you, for joining our Virtual Parent Academy. We hope this session helped you feel more confident navigating the FAFSA process. A few final reminders before we wrap up. This session was recorded, and it's going to be available on our district webpage and on our YouTube channel for you to revisit anytime or share with any families. If you asked a question and we didn't get to it, someone from our team will follow up with you individually. And we'll also be sending out a feedback survey if you joined us live to everyone who attended. Your input, of course, helps make future Parent Academy sessions even more helpful. Thank you again for spending your evening with us and for partnering with us to support student success here in Clay County District Schools. And thank you, Steve. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.